A Snake in the Grass, A Wolf at the Door by Black K. Cat. Chapter 9. As Orochimaru reaches the very edge of the training ground, Sarutobi slips out of the shadows to join him. It is not quite as much of a surprise as it likely should be, but Orochimaru still casts a wary sideways glance at his old teacher nevertheless. Sarutobi smiles at him, weary and worn, and then turns his gaze before them, his steps slow, and Orochimaru matches his pace, all too aware that in terms of power and gold calculation, the Saitama is very much his match. He does not believe that Sarutobi has come to kill him for killing Danzo, but were his death ordered, there is no doubt that Sarutobi would carry it out himself, simply because he would feel it his duty, simply because Orochimaru was once his responsibility, and though a student can outgrow many things, a teacher's charge is never one of them.
That man who escaped,
Sarutobi begins, and stops when Orochimaru snorts. He arches a brow at his pupil expectantly, and Orochimaru allows himself the bare edge of a smirk.
All rats return to their holes eventually,
he says dismissively.
And who better to sniff them out than a snake who has already caught their scent once?
Sarutobi chuckles, fond and pleased.
As I should have expected of you, Orochimaru. Are you referring to yourself or Kiyohime?
He asks slightly.
I would assume Manda is overkill.
Perhaps, but the idea is still tempting. Orochimaru might have let the man flee without pursuing, but the situation here in Konoha has only increased his anger 100-fold. There is a very, very large part of him that wants to call the giant snake up and loose him on Root's trail and then step back to watch the resulting destruction. Even so, the collateral damage, while unimportant in the long run, would end up turning the population of Konoha against him. As they have reached an odd peace in the last few years, entirely through Sakamo's efforts, and Sakamo still values what they think, Orochimaru is reluctant to destroy all chance of turning their opinion of the White Fang around for the better. After all, Konoha is to fight a war soon. The legendary three have only one match in Fire Country, and that is Hatake Sakamo. Surely even the villagers, divorced as they are from the world of shinobi, will realize that they are set on breaking one of the greatest weapons that stands in the defense. And if they will not, Orochimaru is more than willing to persuade them. Sakamo has taught him the value of such understanding after all. Kiyohime, he allows after a moment. She caught his scent before he ran, and I have little doubt that he will retreat somewhere familiar, in the absence of further orders. Danzo was not the type to allow divided loyalty, and moreover he feared his own mortality. Orochimaru suspects that there are few, if any, who the Root Anbu are conditioned to follow outside of Danzo himself. To Danzo, death was an unacceptable outcome. He likely never made allowances for it. When Sarutobi simply nods, accepting this, Orochimaru casts him a cautious look and says carefully, "You do not seem grieved." The Hokage's mouth pulls into a crooked smile, and his eyes are tired.
It has been a very long time since Danzo was just a friend,
he murmurs, and when he stops, Orochimaru turns to face him.
And even longer, since we agreed on anything. He was a brilliant man, uniquely driven, but it blinded him to much of reality, I'm afraid.
Catching the surprise, Orochimaru can't quite hide fast enough. He chuckles.
You thought I'd drag you before the investigations division for his death, Orochimaru? It's unlikely. I am very aware of what lengths Danzo would go to in order to make Konoha match his vision of it. He tried to have me assassinated once, but he was valuable enough that I gave him a second chance. Unfortunately, I believe he simply saw that as another damning moment of weakness in my character, and it only made him more determined.
That is surprising, but also not. Orochimaru considers it for a long moment, and then turns to look towards the curve of the small stream in the distance, where a stand of boulders hides Kakashi's flickering chakra. If you would rather keep Danzo's actions a secret, he starts carefully, minding each word. You should know that I will have little patience and even less temper for such a thing. Wise dark eyes settle on him, linger. Sarutobi sees too much, and always has. Never before has it been a comfort quite like this, and it earned him another smile, more fond and proud than anything. That alone is more than enough to steal Orochimaru's breath. He's used to satisfaction, or wariness, or guarded approval. Always just a little too much a monster to ever win the unguarded expressions Tsunade and Jiraiya always did with ease. But this is something very close to the smiles Sarutobi always gave them, without any edge of judgmental caution to it, and in the face of it, Orochimaru feels as though the world has spun out from beneath his feet.
Then, Sarutobi says judiciously, it's a very good thing I have no intention of hiding it, isn't it? Now, this war was inevitable, but Konoha should know who it truly was that started it. The same way they should know that a hard choice was made, and while perhaps it was the wrong one where the mission was concerned, it was the right one where our fellow shinobi were concerned. 3 Jonin came back alive because of Sakuma's actions, and thus 3 more to stand against Suna and Iwa when they attack.
The relief is like a flame raging through Orochimaru's chest and making him breathe in a single shaky breath that feels like every success he's ever had can burst into one instant. He maintains enough composure to incline his head to Sarutobi and thinks and tries not to think of the way his emotions must be writ large on his face right now. It is perhaps inevitable to look up into Sarutobi's widening smile, the glimmer of fondness now blatant. An age-gnarled hand presses against his shoulder, gripping gently, and Sarutobi squeezes for a moment before stepping back.
You have grown into quite the shinobi, Orochimaru,
he says quietly.
I will admit, I feared for you when Jiraiya and Tsunade left. But you are better. Much better now, I think.
It is laughably ironic that one of the very worst times in his life could give rise to the one that has led him here. Respected, no longer so feared. His 2 friends returned with something very like a family. Bitterly ironic that just as he's settling into place, Sakamo's world could come crashing down, leaving him the pariah that Orochimaru once was. Odd, too, that Sarutobi's words could so mimic Nagato's when Sarutobi has known him for an entire lifetime and Nagato a mere handful of days, all told. Somehow that drives it home all the more, and Orochimaru has been aware that he was changing, that he has changed, but it's different to hear it like this. To hear it from the man he has always admired more than any other, whose footsteps he once aspired to follow. Once, when asked his dream by a kindly man with sparkling brown eyes, Orochimaru, all of 6, had looked up at his soon-to-be sensei, had looked up at a man who was one of the first not to flinch away from him or frown when he came into a room. A man who smiled and greeted all 3 Genin the same, and who even his parents respected as someone truly great. There hadn't even been a choice! Then, Hokage, he had said, and maybe a very large part of it was a desire to have people stop flinching, or a desire for power, or hearing his parents speak the title with a reverence they reserved for very little else. But a part of it was still Sarutobi. I want to be Hokage someday. And Sarutobi had laughed as though he was delighted, as though he liked the idea, and said, well, let's get started on that then. I am, Orochimaru manages, and it rasps uncomfortably in his throat. Not quite an admission of weakness, but perhaps something uncomfortably similar. A confession of humanity when he once disdained such things. And then, because manipulation and motives are far easier than emotion. Is this for me? Sarutobi chuckles, apparently pleased with his insight.
Not entirely, he allows, but you are like another son to me, Orochimaru. You and Jiraiya both. There is quite a lot I would do to keep you happy. Besides that, this information will harm no one. Root is still hidden, and can be merged back into Anbu with no one the wiser, once their loyalty is assured. Danzo is the only one who would be affected, and he is dead. There is nothing that will stop Suna, now that they have an excuse, but knowing it might divide opinions in Wind Country, so it cannot hurt to spread it. Perhaps it being known will even help.
Sharp eyes flickered towards Kakashi's position, softening a little with understanding, and then returned to meet Orochimaru's.
I am a father as well,
Sarutobi reminds him gently.
To have a divide like that between a father and a son, I can't think of much that would be more painful.
It is easy to forget that there is a Sarutobi Hiruzen who does not wear the Hokage's robes, who does not wear Shinobi's Hitayate. More than 20 years almost 30 now, that Orochimaru has known Sarutobi Bawako, and it still surprises him every time to remember that she is tied to his sensei in such a way. He nods, expression carefully even, and Sarutobi's face creases into a small smile.
Here,
he says, and the shape he slides from his belt is as familiar as Orochimaru's own image in a mirror. Perhaps even more so. A moment later, a well-worn Hitayate joins it.
I was hoping you didn't mean to surrender these permanently to my care.
Orochimaru accepts Kusanagi with a faint grimace. I was impatient to see Sakamo, he allows, and Nagato agreed to carry word to you, but I thought his story would be hard to believe, without some form of proof that he spoke for me. He slides the sheathed sword through his belt, then takes the Hitayate and carefully ties it around his brow. Normally, when he's not on missions, he simply tucks it into his belt, but with times being as they are, it will help people to see him displaying his loyalty so clearly. And if he can be loyal to Konoha and still stand beside Sakamo, well, it's a hope. Perhaps the people of the village won't be so foolish as to ignore all hints, especially when the truth is so clear. Loyalty is just another manipulation, he thinks, and no, Sakamo wouldn't approve. But in truth, Orochimaru's loyalty is to one man overall, and because that man loves Konoha, Orochimaru has decided that he will love it too. More than all of Sarutobi's lectures, more than Jiraiya's words and Tsunade's determination, it is Sakamo who has decided Orochimaru's path, and Orochimaru can't find it within himself to regret it.
Best that you did, Sarutobi tells him soberly. I have seen many men driven to drastic action when they despaired, and Sakamo was very close. It would not be arrogance to think you saved his life, Orochimaru.
He sighs, then touches Orochimaru's shoulder again, and steps back with a weary smile.
Go, help Kakashi see the truth. I have to announce Danzo's death and begin arrangements. I have no doubt Suna's declaration of war will arrive with the dawn, if it even takes that long, and Iwa will not be far behind.
Orochimaru nods, but before Sarutobi can do more than turn, he says swiftly, You spoke of dividing opinions in Suna. Konoha never lost so much as a major battle in either of the previous wars. Maybe they think us weak now, but a sure force in the first pitched battle would likely be enough to remind them, and change many minds. Still half turned away, Sarutobi glances back, raising a speaking brow at him.
Perhaps a legendary show of force,
he suggests dryly, and then shakes his head a little.
Have you discussed this?
Not yet, Orochimaru admits evenly.
But do you really doubt that they'll agree?
The snort Sarutobi gives is perilously close to laughter.
Unfortunately, I have long since given up my faith in any of you having even a modicum of sensibility,
he says, dry as dust.
Discuss it. We'll see what the wind blows in, but maybe. Konoha is still strong, and getting stronger by the day. If we can end this war in a few decisive blows, we'll be all the better for it.
With a firm motion, he straightens his hat and strides back towards the village, head held high. Orochimaru watches him until he's out of sight, and then smiles a little. There is relief in him that Sarutobi is still on his side, that whatever his next move, he won't need to set himself against his sensei to make it. Now there's only one more important matter left to deal with, and it's brooding behind a rock a few hundred meters away. With a low sigh, Orochimaru tugs hard on one of his earrings and heads toward the bend of the stream. This is likely going to be a long conversation. Kakashi feels so many things he can't even begin to give name to any of them, and it hurts! Maybe not in a conventional way, not like an open wound or a cut or a headache, but there's still pain! It still feels like something is pulling at him, tugging him in ways he's never gone before, and not allowing him any peace to sort out his thoughts. There's only a swirling rush of confusion, like a river in flood that bears away all sense and beats at everything Kakashi had once thought he knew until it's unrecognizable. His father is a hero, but he's a traitor. His father is a great shinobi, but he's a failure. His father is a good man, but he started a war. Since his father's return, Kakashi has seen him once, briefly, a moment in between Sakamo's meetings with the Hokage and his seclusion in the garden, but I thought you were a good shinobi. Why would you do something like that? He'd meant it in honest bewilderment, but the words had emerged fighting, even so, sharp-edged and angry, even though Kakashi didn't have the first idea if that was actually what he was feeling, and his father had flinched and got pale and stuttered out something before he fled, and Kakashi has been adrift ever since. There are whispers in the village, and the people, shinobi and civilians alike, stared at Kakashi as he passed, as though he had the answers as to why his father would refuse to follow rules they all knew so well. But Kakashi has no answers. Not at all. The Hatake are a shinobi family, and always have been. Sakamoto, Kakashi, and every other member of their clan has been raised to be a ninja since before the time of the clan wars. Of all the people in the world, Sakamoto should know just what the ninja rules mean, why they stand. But he went against them, rescued his team, rather than completing the mission, and now Suna knows and can prove that Konoha is moving against them. That will give Iwa all the excuse they need and plunge Konoha into a war on two fronts. But his father is the kindest person Kakashi knows. Surely he wouldn't have doomed so many people on purpose. Right? There's a whisper of cloth over stone, the faint scrape of a blade against the rock, and a moment later a familiar form slides over the boulders to sink down next to Kakashi. Kakashi looks up, hardly able to believe his eyes, because Konoha has felt so achingly empty, and now everyone in their makeshift little family is back. Surely things can only get better now, right? Oro, he manages, but it comes out choked and half strangled. Orochimaru gives him a small, weary smile, still clad in a dusty Jonin uniform that says he's only just returned. There are faint lines of pain in his face, and he looks tired, but the hand he holds out to Kakashi is as steady as ever. "Cub," he says softly, "are you alright?" He's too old, too much of a shinobi to throw himself at the snake's end and take the hug he wants so badly. All he can do is slide over, press himself almost desperately against Orochimaru's side, and take comfort in the arm that curls around his shoulder and holds him close. He buries his face in cloth that smells faintly of river weed and smoke and earth, breathes in the underlying scent of citrus and crushed green leaves that is Orochimaru, and tries not to shake. "They're saying Tosan is a traitor," he manages after a long moment. "They're saying that he started a war." Orochimaru doesn't immediately jump to Sakamoto's defense, but pauses to consider. Somehow that makes it all the more believable when he says carefully, "You must remember that this is a shinobi village above all, Cub. We play at being normal humans around the civilians, but there is not one among us who truly thinks like them. We're mercenaries, selling our services to anyone who can pay, and that wears away at a great many morals. The shinobi rules were set in place to fight that, to make sure that if we cannot be normal humans, we can at least be very good at what we do. At the same time, Konoha holds itself above the rest of the villages because we rely on teamwork, on never leaving a friend behind, on fighting to the death to protect what is precious to us." There's another pause, and then Orochimaru sighs softly and leans into Kakashi, turning his head to stare out over the river. His hair, falling almost completely free of its silver ribbon, slides over Kakashi's skin like stray bits of dark silk, impassively comforting in its familiarity. "Your father broke a rule, yes, but he broke it to follow one of Konoha's unspoken rules. War was brewing regardless of his actions, and so I would prefer to see it as Sakamoto upholding Konoha's legacy rather than betraying its values." Attached to his cheek, tipping his head up, and Kakashi reluctantly meets steady golden eyes edged with streaks of violet. "What do you think, Kakashi? Saving the life of a friend at the expense of the mission? Which would you choose? If it were Sakamoto or I in danger and abandoning the rules would save us, how would you pick, Cub?" 10 minutes ago, Kakashi wouldn't have hesitated to say he would finish the mission, because that's what a shinobi does. That's what's expected. Anything else is unacceptable. But it's actually not, is it? Kakashi closes his eyes, trying to breathe past the lump in his throat, and tries to imagine it. Tries to picture his father or Orochimaru in danger, about to die, and he can either turn back and save them or leave them to their fate for the sake of a job. And really, phrased like that, It's not a choice at all, is it? Yo, he whispers, and it feels as though a weight has lifted off his body with the admission. Maybe it doesn't make what his father did right, but he understands it now. He'd make the same choice. That's all he really needs to know. I'd pick you. I'd pick my friends. Just like Tosan did. That gets him a smile, fierce and proud, and Orochimaru bends in to press a kiss to his forehead. It's a rare gesture, because Orochimaru is forever aloof, but it's one that Kakashi needs desperately right now. He leans into it, breathes in the smell and feel of the man who might as well be a second father to him, and can't be anything but overwhelmingly, achingly grateful. A hand ruffles his hair, and he looks up again to see Orochimaru watching him fondly.
The rules are important, he says softly. They keep us from becoming animals, hold us to standards, because we would likely crumble without such things. But the rules can never be everything, Kakashi. Sometimes, even when the logic says you should obey, it's better to follow the will of fire inside you.
One long, slender finger taps the center of his chest.
Sarutobi-sensei always told me it was very much like following your heart.
Instructors at the academy always used to talk about the will of fire, and Kakashi just as readily dismissed it as complete tripe. It's odd now to hear Orochimaru, who is very far from sentimental and just as far from being one to resort to truisms, speak of such a thing so easily. I thought, he says carefully, because careless words have already done enough damage lately, that the will of fire was the urge to love the village and bring peace through that love. Orochimaru makes a thoughtful sound, tipping his head back to look up at the sky. His long hair slides like liquid over his shoulders, and his earrings flicker with silver brilliance in the waning light. Kakashi reaches out before he can stop himself, brushes his fingers over an ivory tooth, the way he's seen Orochimaru do so many times. It's sharp, but smooth, honed to a dangerous point, and very like the man who wears it. Just as quickly, he pulls his hand back, thinking he might have crossed a boundary, but Orochimaru just casts him a sideways look that's merely a smirk, and Kakashi feels his breath leave him in a rush. Reassured, he drops his hand, twists his fingers into a long lock of hair instead, like he used to when he was a small child. A hand closes over his, squeezing gently, and then releases. Orochimaru looks back to the evening sky, the stretching shadows, and smiles a little.
That's certainly one definition of it, he agrees. However, everyone is different. Why should the definition always be the same? For some people, the village is all they need.
Shadows not caused by the setting sun flicker over his face, linger around his eyes, and his next smile is wry.
Some shinobi need more. It is not a failing, even if it may feel like it. Sometimes finding something to protect needs to be personal.
He's talking about himself, Kakashi realizes, and it shouldn't be the surprise it is. Kakashi has always known very well just how Orochimaru views the rest of the village outside his small circle, knows how they view him even now. Better according to his father, with awe rather than pure terror, but still. Such a thing wears, as Kakashi has come to find since they labeled him a genius and took a collective step back. Another long glance at the sky, and then Orochimaru pushes to his feet, bonelessly graceful, and offers Kakashi a hand up. Kakashi takes it, with a hand not still caught up in black hair, and Orochimaru pulls him to his feet, but doesn't let go immediately. Golden eyes catch on gray, and Orochimaru's gaze is fierce, focused, the way his summons are when they finally pick up a trail.
Being a shinobi means many things, and many choices, Cub. But perhaps the most important is to decide whether you have anything you would truly die for. Find whatever it is that you would lay down your life to protect, and then never let go of it.
You found it? Kakashi asks, even though he's already fairly certain he knows the answer. Orochimaru's lips tilt into a wry smile, and he inclines his head.
There was a time when I hadn't, and I drifted. I very nearly set my feet on a path from which there was no return. But then I met your father, and you. Do have something to care about. After so long without, it is as addictive as it is unnerving.
One pale hand ruffles Kakashi's hair gently, because even if to everyone else in the world Orochimaru is a dangerous killer with destruction lurking just under his skin, he's never been anything but gentle with Kakashi. And he looks up to meet that weighted gaze again. Orochimaru smiles, leaning down to touch another glancing kiss to his forehead, and then steps back. Kakashi lets him go, feeling raven hair slip through his fingers like water as he opens his hand. Tosan is okay? He finally manages, even though the words want to stick in his throat. It takes effort not to flinch, remembering his father's reaction to his careless words this morning. With another small inclination of his head, Orochimaru turns, eyes seeking the lights of the village as they flicker on in the growing gloom. It will be, the Sannin says, and the tone of his voice is somewhere between certainty and a promise. Kakashi can't quite tell which relieves him more. Opinion is a fickle thing, and those who started these whispers will be dealt with shortly. War is coming, but it has been for years, practically since the last one ended. People will come to see that. And if there is one thing war is good for, it is providing a common enemy to unite against. Perhaps it will take time, but the state cannot last forever. Kakashi manages a nod, even when it feels as though Orochimaru physically reached into his chest and tongued all the worry right out to leave him empty, if in a good way. It takes effort not to stagger. Thank you, he whispers. Orochimaru smiles at him, faint but warm. Come home when you're ready, cub. We'll be waiting. One more glancing touch of pale fingers through his hair, and then Orochimaru turns away, taking 3 long steps back towards the village before he calls up a Shunshin and vanishes in a whirlwind of leaves. For a long moment, Kakashi stares after him, then slowly sinks back down onto the rocks. He presses his hands over his face, rubbing hard, and then lets out a shaky breath. He's not an idiot. Those who started these whispers, Orochimaru said, that implies a cause behind the hate, more than just a failed mission and a coming war. Because even Kakashi knows what's been brewing, and for all his genius, he's only 6! Kakashi knows he's a prodigy, but he still manages to miss things, to overlook things. That even he hasn't missed the careful preparations for future hostilities, which have been happening for as long as he can remember, means that the coming war was obvious! To blame his father alone, rather than uniting behind him because he did follow Konoha's unspoken rules, even at the risk of his life, points to some kind of malicious intent aimed against the White Fang himself. Kakashi isn't worried. Orochimaru implied he would deal with it, and that's enough to set Kakashi almost completely at ease. The Snake Sannin loves Sakamoto after all, and loves Kakashi himself, and Kakashi doesn't need him to speak the words to know that. His actions say more than enough. Scales scrape over rock, a bare hiss of sound over the rustle of wind-tossed leaves, and Kakashi smiles, lifting his arm so that Kiyohime can coil up beside him and rest her sleek head on his knee. He strokes his fingers over midnight dark scales, watching a long tongue flicker out to taste the air, and knows that this is another of those unspoken expressions. Kiyohime is one of Orochimaru's favorites, was one of his mother's favorites, even if he'll never say as much. And the fact that he has all but adopted Kakashi to her says a great deal. Kakashi doesn't mind. Orochimaru's snakes are beautiful, coldly intelligent in a way Kakashi can appreciate. And even if most people shy away from them, Kakashi never will. Oro went back to Tosan? He asks, just to make sure. He doesn't want to think of his father being alone right now. Kiyohime considers for a moment, then nips her head in a motion that's very much like the one Kakashi has seen Orochimaru use so many times. Yes, she confirms in her razor-edged whispery voice. He banished the shadow and took its place. A shadow clone, Kakashi understands with a flicker of relief. Orochimaru must have left it with his father when he went out to look for Kakashi. It's honestly not a surprise. For all that Orochimaru is bad with most people, he knows Sakamoto better than anyone. Good, he manages, letting himself relax a little. He opens his mouth to ask another question, because if anyone can figure out Orochimaru's plans, it's Kiyohime, and a surge of fire, a faint yelp, a splash from further up the stream. Kakashi jolts to his feet, Kiyohime, a flash of darkness sliding past him in a flicker of impossible speed. A chakra-assisted bound sends him over the boulders, landing in a crouch with a kunai in hand to face a boy. A familiar boy with black hair that manages to be wildly messy even when waterlogged, equally dark eyes wide behind a pair of tinted goggles as they fall on Kakashi. On the snake coiling herself around his feet defensively, and Kakashi braces himself for screams, for terror, for a flinch at the very least. Instead, Uchiha Obito's eyes widened further and his entire face lights up with enthusiasm. Oh, wow! Is that your summons? He's amazing! She! Kakashi corrects automatically, still mired in bewilderment. And she's not mine, she's Oro's. Confusion flickers over Obito's mobile features, followed by a spark of understanding. And he pulls himself out of the stream with a bright grin, letting his scorched jacket drop to the ground with a squelch. Oh, you mean the stand-in Orochimaru? No wonder she's so big. Then he blinks, looks at Kiyohime, and says, "Sorry, you're beautiful." Kiyohime tilts her head, tongue flickering out as her electric blue eyes linger on the Uchiha. And she agrees, and if anything, Obito looks even more enthusiastic at hearing her speak. Most people don't notice. Obito just laughs, bright and happy, and drops to sit cross-legged on the bank, tearfully wringing out his sleeves. People are stupid, he agrees easily, pushing his orange goggles up into his hair. Belatedly, Kakashi realizes he's still holding his kunai and tucks it back into his weapons pouch. He gives Obito a cautious glance because he remembers the other boy from the academy the brief time he was in the same class before he moved up. They'd fought frequently, both in spars and in less sanctioned squabbles, and from what Kakashi remembers beyond the antagonism, Obito was decent. Too impatient, too prone to bursts of emotion, but still fairly good for a non-genius student. He'd held his own against Kakashi several times at least, and Kakashi has been bounced around enough Genin teams in the last few months to know that even some of the Genin can't do the same. Were you trying a fire jutsu? He asks, eyeing the boy's charred sleeves and singed eyebrows, streaks of soot still clinging to his face despite his dip in the water. Obito makes a face, turning his own weapons pouch upside down and letting the water drain out of it in an impressive stream. Yeah, he admits, frowning. The Grand Fireball Jutsu! Uchiha don't consider you an adult until you can manage it, but I just can't! The frustration is clear in his words, sharp with an edge of self-loathing Kakashi can't help but hear. He hesitates, casting another look at the deep violet sky because Minato asked him to pick up a whole stack of books for him at the library, and Kakashi wants to get that done quickly so he can get home. But Obito is out here alone, struggling with the jutsu, and Kakashi remembers the rumors he heard in the academy that Obito lives alone, that his parents are dead. Remembers that no one ever came to pick Obito up or drop him off. Obito always showed up alone, and with his father still at the forefront of his mind, Kakashi is sensitive to loneliness right now. If it blew up in your face, your chakra control isn't good enough to maintain the jutsu, he says, and only after the words have left his mouth does he realize just how blunt and tactless that sounded. Remembering just how this whole mess with his father started, Kakashi winces. But instead of offense, there's only surprise on Obito's face as he pauses in laying out his coat. A long moment of silence, and then Obito blinks, brows furrowing. Are you helping me? He asks disbelievingly. Kakashi flushes before he can stop himself, shoulders coming up defensively. Yes, he spits out, I'm good at ninjutsu, and Obito laughs, not cruelly, not mockingly, but surprised, bright as Kakashi thought before. And when he looks up again, his smile is even more brilliant, like a bonfire in the dark, even with half his face in shadow. And Kakashi doesn't quite know what to do with that. People just don't look at him like that. And it always, it's with an edge of arrogance, a twist of jealousy, a flicker of awe or fear or anger, not friendship, open and warm and so easily offered. Thanks, Kakashi, Obito says. He pulls himself to his feet, still grinning, and says, we should spar. There's only a couple other Uchiha my age, and they've all got sticks up their butts already, so they won't. I thought you were the same way, but I guess you're pretty cool. Kakashi blinks. He's been called a lot of things, but cool is a first. Well, unless one counts Guy. Kakashi never, ever counts Guy. Okay? He manages, through his astonishment, then suspicious rears his head and he tenses, adding waspishly, I'm not helping you cheat in class, though. Indignation flushes Obito's face and he scowls, bristling like a wet cat. Kakashi, he snaps, I wouldn't ask you to do that. I'm gonna be an awesome shinobi and I'm gonna do it myself. Oh, Kakashi blinks again, stepping back and almost treading on Kiyohime's coils. She hisses at him, making him freeze automatically because she was his babysitter more than once when he was young enough to need one, and he knows that tone very well. And Obito starts laughing again, all the fury leaving him in a rush. You look like she just threatened to put you in a timeout, he offers cheerfully, outrage apparently forgotten. It wouldn't be the first time, little hatchling, Kiyohime says, and her tone is knife's edge amused, traced with just the faintest gilding of fondness that Kakashi only hears because he knows her well. If anything, Obito just looks even more delighted by that. He opens his mouth, but before he can say anything, Kakashi cuts it, desperate to save himself any more embarrassment. I'll spar with you, he says quickly. I have to lug books for an idiot Jonin right now, but tomorrow? Obito smiles, bouncing up next to Kakashi as if they really are friends and not just people who pick to fights with each other in the academy. You're working for a Jonin? That's cool! Do you need any help carrying stuff? I'm good at that. Kakashi has seen Obito around the village, trailing after old ladies with bags of groceries that probably outweigh him. He doesn't doubt Obito's physical strength for even a minute, and, well, Minato really did ask for a lot of books. It would definitely be easier with 2 people, and would mean he could finish faster and get home sooner. You're all wet, is what he says though. Then Obito's face falls, expression bleeding over to hurt, and before Kakashi's brain cells can okay it, his mouth adds, my house is close if you want to borrow something you gotta wear. Wide black eyes meet Kakashi's own, full of something very like astonishment and affection, gratitude, maybe even joy, and Kakashi has never seen anything quite like it directed at him before. Sure, Obito agrees, and his smile is brilliant in the darkness. Thanks, Kakashi. Kakashi doesn't really have enough experience with such things to know, but he's fairly certain that he just gained a friend.